Welcome back, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for our reception portion of the program here. I do want to make sure that everybody saw our art installation over there, the butterflies. Those were created by survivors of sexual abuse in two South Carolina prisons as a part of JDI's #Prisoners2 program. It's a healing art and expression program to help survivors of sexual abuse join the Me Too movement, tell their own Me Too stories. And they created these butterflies especially for all of us so that they would go out into the world and be shared with everyone to help highlight the issue of sexual abuse in detention and the courage of survivors. So if you haven't gotten a chance to take a look at them, I'd really encourage you to do so before you leave tonight. And now we're going to move to do something very special. We're going to present the inaugural John A. Kaneb Leadership Award. For decades, the crisis of prisoner rape remained in shadows, ignored by the media, by philanthropy, by advocates, by corrections, and the elected officials who had a responsibility to stop it. And were it not for John Kaneb, it's not an overstatement to say that that might have continued. His profound belief in every person's right to dignity was essential to ensuring the passage of PREA. And as a PREA commissioner, his input was essential to the PREA standards. John's contributions to the movement, though, did not end once PREA passed. He continued to work to make sure that survivors got services. He continued to push for compassion for incarcerated people. And he understood that PREA was one piece of this work and one step in the journey. And it wasn't complete until the crisis of prisoner rape was over. John was always ready to put in the work. He fought with us for strong, meaningful implementation of the PREA standards. We've heard us talking about the Sexual Abuse Services in Detention Act, and that is work that we continue in his legacy. It was work that he started with us. John Kaneb was somebody who was compassionate, abhorred bullies, and again, insisted on human rights for everyone. He was a champion in this movement, and when we lost him, we lost a really important part of this movement and this fight. So I am so incredibly honored to introduce his son, Stephen Kaneb, to present the inaugural John Kaneb Leadership Awards. I've gotten to know Stephen over the last couple of years and learned that he carries on his father's legacy in his dedication, his compassion for human rights. And I am looking for Stephen Kaneb now. Where is he? He's right there. Hello. Thank you so much. And I will hand it to you.
Thank you, Linda. It has been a privilege to get to know Linda and so many of the people in this room as a result of this remarkable legislation, and 20 years into it, seeing the progress we continue to make. Yolanda highlighted to me the word entitlement, and it has so many meanings. In the context of the work here, I see it as a way of expressing something my father held very deeply, because we all witness levels of entitlement in all different societies, in countries, in incarcerated houses of detention. What it calls to mind is something that my parents taught all of their 6 sons, and that is, to those who've been entrusted with much, much will be expected. And to those entrusted with even more will be demanded. On October 1st, 1997, a 10-year-old boy named Jeffrey Curley was abducted, sexually assaulted, and murdered by two men from the Boston area. I worked together with my dad in the office, and the men were arrested shortly thereafter. And in the ensuing several days, terribly ugly conversations were happening at water coolers, on talk radio, and even in families about how those perpetrators would be finding their own kind of justice. I realized that I needed to talk to my dad about it. And I told him, and he said, I know. I agree. And yes, we need to do something about it. I'm already working on it. It was about 6 years later that this law was voted unanimously in both houses and signed by President Bush. I can't tell you how much I'm honored to be in your presence today to hear our panelists, real heroes, those who know the meaning of that when the worst comes at us. Adversity, in its worst, brings out the best in us. And so I want to ask Linda to start this off with, we are going to present to whom? This is the one we know that we need to get him back to other things in the building, and he's made time for us today. Senator Cornyn, my dad spoke very highly of all the recipients here today. You're a close friend of his and my mom's, and this is a very personal award from the entire Kaneb family on behalf of my dad. Thank you so much for your work, and may you continue in God's grace.
Thank you.
Yes, if you would. Everyone.
Well, Stephen, thank you very much. It's great to be here with all of you, including my friend Jeff Sessions. Jeff and I were both attorney generals of our respective states. So I've always considered myself a law enforcement guy. But I also understand that the goal of our prison system was not to perpetually incarcerate people, but actually, hopefully, set them on the road to rehabilitation and to rejoin society as productive members of society. And when I met John Kaneb, it was not necessarily in this particular context. He started talking to me about things that, frankly, I wondered, do people in polite company talk about things like this? Things like prison rape? But it is, sadly, a reality. And that people, for you see here, that rape is not part of the penalty that people are sentenced to if they do commit an offense and do go to jail or do go to prison. And nobody felt more passionately about that than my friend John Kaneb. As the custodian of these individuals, either in local or state facilities or federal facilities, we have a responsibility as the government to make sure that they aren't mistreated, that they're not sexually assaulted, that they're not further traumatized by their incarceration. Going to jail, going to prison is tough enough without having to suffer the humiliation and the assault on your person and your dignity that this entails. So one thing I mentioned to his sons is that what struck me about John Kaneb is his persistence. He was, once he got on this topic, he did not let up. And I know every time I would see him, or he would call me, or he'd come to Washington, D.C., he'd want an update on where we stood. So that he ensured the passage of the Prison Rape Elimination Act. But then once the bill passed, he was concerned about making sure that it was being implemented the way it should and being monitored in a way that it should. So over the last 2 decades, PREA has encouraged correctional facilities of all kinds to adopt zero tolerance policies for sexual assault and implement comprehensive training for staff and inmates alike. Of course, that includes data collection and reporting, things that would shed light on how well the legislation was or was not working, with the goal of eliminating this sort of assault on people's person and their dignity. PREA has sparked a cultural shift within our correctional systems that remind us that safety and respect and dignity are fundamental rights that should not be compromised just because somebody happens to be behind bars. Again, our goal is not to degrade the individual, to incapacitate them, to perpetually incarcerate them. The goal of our criminal justice system is to hopefully let people pay for their offense. If you do the crime, you do the time, but then hopefully enter back into civil society. So I'm very proud of the work that our country has done, but we need to acknowledge that we are far away from completing the journey, and there are still people who suffer these sorts of abuses who don't report them, or correctional facilities don't give them the opportunity they need to report them. So Brian Schatz, my colleague from Hawaii, who's a Democrat, and I'm a Republican from Texas, we introduced the Sexual Abuse Services and Detentions Act, which would ensure that incarcerated individuals who have suffered abuse can receive a broad range of free and confidential counseling and emotional support. And it also gives training to correctional staff. I doubt many prison guards would ordinarily get the sort of training that this contemplates to help them deal with these incarcerated individuals who've gone through this trauma. Well, I'm grateful to each of you for advocating for this legislation, and I hope we can move it over the line in Congress. But I want to thank all of you for your unwavering dedication to this cause. And I particularly want to say thank you to the family of John Kaneb, who was the relentless advocate for these causes. And, you know, for a guy who was enormously successful in life, he didn't have to be concerned about this, but to me it said something really key about his character and who he was as an individual, that he actually cared about an issue like this. And I was proud to know him and proud to call him my friend. John, let's get a picture with the four of us. Where are you going to win? Yeah. Stand sideways. No. Come on. Come up close. Uncomfortably close, they say.
Thank you.
As we just heard, it is a family affair. I also wanted to have you meet my wife, Andrea, and my brother, Jeff. This is a family affair. My dad was in this all in. We wouldn't hear from him frequently, but we knew how passionate he was about it. One brother in particular, I'd like to call out my brother, Peter, who is the most active in ministering to the incarcerated, was last night at the Middlesex jail and performing the ministry that he has for decades. It lives on. So next we have Bobby Scott. Congressman already addressed us, but please accept this on behalf of JDI and in special remembrance of my dad. Thank you so much for your work.
Thank you, sir.
As was just mentioned,
I think most of the people here heard me this afternoon. I just want to say that also this afternoon, I inserted into the record a statement that includes most of what I said earlier today about the 20th anniversary, the hard work that went into it, the cooperation, bipartisan cooperation made this possible, and the lives that have been changed. So Frank and Jeff, thank you so much. It was a pleasure working with you and Ted Kennedy to get this done. We still have work to do, but this shows that sometimes when we get together, a lot of good can be done, and we haven't finished. Thank you so much.
I think Senator Sessions might get the, well, we would sometimes, yeah, the most traveled award, but he managed to finagle at the airport to get here on time, ahead of time, I think. Thank you so much.
And go through it, Baltimore, but I made it.
Again, we heard so much about your legacy through my dad. It was a privilege for him to work with you, and this is so much deserved and appreciated on behalf of the family and JDI.
All right.
Congratulations.
Thank you. That is so good. I won't give you a long speech. I don't get paid for that anymore, like Cornyn and Bobby. Frank doesn't either. But it was, I called some of my staffers to talk about this. The notice got to me late because I'm pretty incommunicado in Alabama. And so we're going to have dinner tonight. And they were so excited about this and felt so good about having been a part of something that made life better for a lot of people. I do know that prison wardens and leaders do not like to admit they've got problems in jails. And they got a tough job. It's not easy. But if you tell the truth and report truthfully, things usually get better. And it's when you cover them up that things get worse. So I think this bill did do something that was good. I was honored to work with Ted Kennedy on it. He was a champion of civil rights and civil liberties. And I felt like as a prosecutor, I was a United States attorney for 12 years. And a lot of people went to jail under my staff and me. And you don't punish twice. Everybody, whether they're in jail or not, are human beings with full human rights, and they ought to be protected. So thank you all, and I'm honored to have this. Thank you.
Last and certainly not least is Congressman Wolf, who is here, and it's so touching to see all these leaders and the witnesses we heard tonight of survivors of this terrible scourge in our midst, and that we're all doing so much together. We're in it for the long haul. Congressman, thank you so much for your service, and congratulations on behalf of my dad, my family, and JDI.
Well, I'll be relatively brief. One, thank you very much for the award. Secondly, your dad would come around. I knew all about Hood Milk because my wife is from Marblehead, and she was raised on Hood Milk and used to deliver it. Had a little box outside then. And so I didn't know why this guy was coming by, but your dad was faithful. He would come over and over and over and over. And so it had not been for him, many bad things would have happened to people in prison. Secondly, I want to thank all the staff. I know Tom Culligan from my staff and some of the others. This was not easy because there were a lot of people who didn't want the bill to be passed. So I want to thank all of those who worked on the bill and the staff people. Lastly, I am accepting this on behalf of Chuck Colson. And Chuck sent some people, Chuck talked to me. Chuck was a mentor of mine. My daughter worked for Chuck, and one of my son-in-laws worked for Chuck. And Chuck came by to tell me, and at first, you don't think about it. And Chuck sent some prisoners by, some men and women who were raped. I tell you, it broke the heart. You couldn't believe. Not only by other prisoners, but by guards and other people in the institutions. So I accept this on behalf of Chuck Colson, may God bless him, and all the men and women who have faced that atrocities in prison, and hope that we can eliminate it so it never happens to anybody again. Thank you.
I just have to say, Frank Wolf is, through his entire career, my 20 years in the Senate, I don't think anybody throughout he's impacted the entire world with his commitment to humanity and his faith. And Frank, thank you for your service. Thank you.
Well, thank you for that. And that was a perfect segue to the next and final part of our program this evening. I certainly am feeling inspired by that declaration. And so I really want to thank you again and just heap on the praise for the awardees tonight for your commitment, the work that you all put in to protect incarcerated survivors, and the lasting impact that work has had. As you've heard tonight, all of us who are doing this work are doing it on the shoulders of the work that you put in there to do that, to pass PREA. And I just want to thank you so much for championing the rights of people that so many would rather ignore. So thank you all for that. And now I want to introduce someone very special and do something very special. So as you know and you heard tonight, Just Attention International has a survivor council. It's a group of people who are survivors of sexual abuse in detention, who advise JDI on our programs, on our mission, on our direction, who train, who speak, who are the true experts and hold the true key to how we end this crisis once and for all. Their courage, their determination, their intelligence, their wisdom, their spirit, their determination is why I'm still doing this work after nearly 20 years. And it inspires all of us, and they're who we need to learn from. They advise every aspect of our work, and nothing that we've accomplished and nothing that any of us in this room have accomplished would be possible without them. And it's not just me who believes in their work in the council. I am incredibly honored to share to JDI's Survivor Council a letter from Senator Cornyn and Congressman Scott that commemorating the 20th anniversary and honoring the work. It says, "This is for your leadership in working towards PREA's mission in ending sexual abuse in detention. Your courageous voices give rise to an unprecedented national movement against sexual abuse in detention. We are incredibly grateful for your willingness to come forward and share your experiences as a survivor, to speak out against prisoner rape, and to ensure that we always remember those who remain in custody. Thank you." So today we recognize and celebrate the successes that we've had over the last 20 years, while recognizing that that work is far from over. The Survivor Council is an invaluable resource in the fight against sexual abuse in detention, and there still remains much to do since the passage of PREA. We have no doubt that you, the Survivor Council, will continue to be tireless advocates and educators, and we thank you now for all that you have done. And I'd like to invite Stephanie Walker, a member of our Survivor Council and our board, and the liaison between the two on our executive committee, to accept this on behalf of JDI Survivor Council.
I want to first say thank you so much. Your compassion just then just meant the world to me. I want to start by saying thank you so much. Linda, I am honored to accept this award on behalf of the Survivor Council. I am a survivor. council member myself, along with being on the JDI board and serve as a liaison between the two. Congressman Scott, it means so much to receive this recognition from you. One of the true champions for incarcerated survivors. We survivors know that we have someone who fights for us. On the Hill, and Congressman Scott, as well as Senator Schultz and Cornyn. I want to acknowledge my fellow council members from the past and from the present, many of who are here today. I want to call out Emmett Black, Jonas Caballero. If they could stand with me. Lee Doss. D. Farmer. Robbie Hall. Hope Hernandez. Johanna Mills. Kai Peterson. And Esmeralda Soto. Even though I've only met some of you in person for the first time on this trip, we have something in common that binds us all together. We've all walked that walk, but we're here today as survivors. We not only survived a horrifying ordeal behind the bars, but we spoke out against it, galvanizing a moment to stop this abuse from happening to others. Priya is just the beginning of what we can accomplish together in this fight to ensure the dignity of people who are incarcerated. Finally, I want to say that I know how much courage it takes to speak out against prisoner rape, to break the silence and become advocates, so that no one has to go through that in which what we did. But I also know the survivors aren't often listened to. So I want to thank all of you for listening to us around this room and those of you out there. The politicians, the aides, the advocates, the staff at JDI, and every human rights nonprofit doing the work, the family members of survivors, all of you, your compassion gave us courage to move forward and stand strong as you see us stand before you today. Saying that, I thank you again for this recognition, and I thank you to the survivors everywhere for inspiring us in our fight and for our dignity in all human rights. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Stephanie. My immense gratitude to all of you for being here, to the Survivor Council, to our awardees, to the Kaneb family, to JDI staff who've worked so tirelessly at this work every day and to put this together, to all of the allies and advocates and champions in the room. Thank you so much. Please get to know each other, share stories, share resources, gain inspiration to continue this work, and have some lovely food and beverages and enjoy. We have the room for quite a while longer, so thank you so much. Oh, and please check out the butterflies.